He had only planned to water the roses. James didn't expect to hear the sound of his daughter's voice cracking like glass through the half-open window of her room upstairs, her words rolling out with a tremor that pulled him literally and emotionally closer than he had ever dared. He stopped moving, his hose dripping silently onto the stone path, as her voice caught again. "She thinks I don't remember," Emily whispered. "But I do. I remember everything she did to Mom. And to me." James felt his chest tighten. He leaned toward the window, almost involuntarily, hidden by the shadow of the overhang and the climbing vines he once planted with his wife, his real wife, Lily. Inside, Emily's voice dropped lower, but the clarity of pain made every word sharp. "She told me if I said anything, she'd send me away, just like she sent away Mom when she got sick. I thought it was the cancer, but it wasn't. It wasn't just the cancer, Dad. It was her." James gripped the window frame to steady himself. The name on Emily's lips hadn't been spoken in this house for years. Not like that. Not with such raw memory. He remembered the day Lily died. The day his second wife, Susan, took over more than just the household. She took control of everything. Emily had changed after that. Withdrawn, quiet. But James had blamed it on grief, on teenage mood swings, on anything except Susan. Because facing the truth would have meant admitting he let a monster into their lives. Now, it was all unraveling. Inside, Emily kept speaking, unaware that her words were pulling the floor out from under her father's world. "I saw the pills. The ones she said were vitamins. But they weren't. I looked them up. They weren't for Mom. They were for her nerves because she couldn't handle being around someone dying. She told Mom to stop crying, told her to stop making it so dramatic. And when Mom begged for you to come home early from that business trip, she said you refused." James gasped silently. That Trife had been gone for nearly 2 weeks. Susan insisted he go. Said she'd take care of everything. That Lily didn't want him seeing her in that state. That had been a lie. "My mother died alone, Dad." Emily's voice broke. "Because you weren't there. Because she made sure of it." James stumbled back from the window as if burned, his breath catching in his throat. The pain that bloomed in his chest now was not new. It had lingered, ignored, buried, but Emily's voice gave it form, gave it truth. Inside, her monologue continued, but James was no longer just a listener. He was a man whose world had been constructed on someone else's deception. 2 weeks earlier, the house had felt quieter than usual that morning. Susan moved with her usual air of pristine order, lips tight, hair perfect, hands never idle. She was folding laundry in the living room when Emily came down the stairs, her backpack clutched tightly against her chest. "Morning," Susan said without looking up. Emily didn't answer. She walked straight to the front door. Susan looked up then. "Where are you going?" "School." "It's Saturday." Emily stopped. "Then I'm going to the library." Susan narrowed her eyes. "I told you. I know what you told me." Emily snapped, the fire behind her voice catching Susan off guard. "But I'm going anyway." There was a moment of silence. Then Susan smiled. Cold. Measured. "Watch your tone, little girl. Remember who pays for this house." Emily didn't flinch. "It's Dad's house." Susan stood. "That may be, but I run it now. And you'll do as I say." Emily's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. She opened the door and left. Upstairs, in her room, she'd buried the old photo in her desk for years, one of the last taken before her mother's decline. She and Lily sat on the porch steps, arms entwined, sun on their faces. Emily looked happy in it. Innocent. But she wasn't anymore. She carried the picture everywhere now, folded carefully in her notebook. A reminder of what had been taken, of what she had to find a way to speak aloud. Back in the present, James wandered back into the garden like a ghost. The air was heavy with summer heat, but he felt cold, distant, detached. He hadn't just missed signs, she had willfully ignored them. The memory of Susan standing over Lily's bed, comforting her, flashed in his mind. He remembered how detached she'd seemed, how quickly she'd begun organizing the funeral, how she refused to let Emily stay in the room the night Lily passed. She needs rest, Susan had said. It's not good for her to see her mother like this. But Lily had asked for Emily. Over and over. James hadn't fought hard enough. Now the truth came roaring back with cruel clarity. Lily had died afraid and alone. That night, James couldn't sleep. He lay awake staring at the ceiling, hearing every creak of the house like it was whispering secrets. Emily had gone to bed early, eyes red, lips sealed. She had no idea he'd hurt her. And Susan, ever composed, had kissed him good night and gone to bed without a flicker of guilt. He turned over and stared at the side of the bed where she lay sleeping, or pretending to. His chest burned. He rose silently and left the room. In the den, he poured himself a whiskey and sat in the dark, memories swirling like smoke in his head. Lily's laughter, her letters, the way she used to sing when she washed dishes. And then Susan's voice, always sharp, always in control. "Stop wallowing," she once told him. "She's dead, and you're still here." The words had struck him as cruel then. Now, they felt criminal. The next morning, James asked Emily to go for a drive. She looked surprised but agreed. They didn't speak for the first 10 minutes, just drove through winding back roads lined with trees heavy with summer bloom. Finally, James pulled over by the lake. The same lake where he and Lily used to take Emily when she was small. They sat in silence on the hood of the car. James handed her a small envelope. Inside was a photo of Emily as a baby, wrapped in Lily's arms, both of them laughing under a blanket of golden leaves. "I found it last night," James said quietly, "behind the bookcase. I thought it was lost." Emily looked at it for a long time. Her fingers trembled. "I miss her," she whispered. James nodded. "Me too." Then, gently, he asked, "Why didn't you ever tell me about Susan?" Emily looked at him, startled. Then her face collapsed into 1,000 emotions. "You heard." He nodded. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't look away. "I was scared. She always said you'd choose her, that you wouldn't believe me. And you were so gone. After Mom died. I was blind," James said. "I'm sorry." They sat in silence again, until James finally said, "I believe you now." Every word. The next decision would change everything. And Susan had no idea what was coming. The wheels of James's car crunched over the gravel driveway as they pulled back in front of the house. Emily sat silently beside him, still clutching the photo he had given her at the lake. The image felt heavier now than when he'd first found it. It wasn't just a picture anymore. It was a promise, a line drawn in memory and pain, a reckoning long overdue. James turned the engine off, but didn't reach for the door. "You go in first," he said, eyes forward. "I'll follow in a minute." Emily glanced at him. "What are you going to do?" His jaw tightened. "I'm going to ask her everything I should have asked years ago." She hesitated, then nodded. Without another word, she stepped out and went inside. James waited until the door clicked shut behind her before he got out. The sun was still high, but to him, the air felt like dusk had already fallen. Susan was in the kitchen when he walked in, humming to herself as she poured a glass of white wine. The sound stopped the second she saw his face. "Everything all right?" she asked, tone light, but her eyes narrowed slightly. James closed the door behind him with deliberate care. "We need to talk." She set the wine glass down. "Is this about Emily again?" "I told you, James, she's going through a phase. Teenagers always push back, and I don't appreciate." "I said." James interrupted, "We need to talk." The edge in his voice froze her mid-step. "I know," he added. "What happened?" "With Lily. With Emily." For a long moment, Susan didn't move. Then, slowly, she walked to the sink and turned on the faucet, as if the noise of running water might shield her from the truth. "I don't know what she told you," she said, "but she's been confused for a long time. Her mother's death hit her hard. You can't trust. She said you gave Lily pills." Susan's back stiffened. "She said you told her I refused to come home," James continued. That Lily begged for me. Silence. James took a step forward. Did she? Susan turned around. Her face was unreadable. Her carefully constructed mask had not cracked, but he could see now that it was, in fact, a mask. You don't understand what it was like, she said evenly. That house. The wait. Your wife was dying, James. And she was. Dramatic. She was making it harder for Emily. For you. He stared at her. Harder for me. She clung, Susan snapped. She clung to you. Every time you were home, she dragged you down with her. You stopped sleeping. You stopped living. I tried to help. I told her she needed to let go. You told her to die quietly. Susan's lips curled. I told her not to make a spectacle, to have some dignity. James felt his pulse pounding in his ears. And the pills. They were for her, Susan said sharply, to ease her anxiety. You weren't there, James. You didn't see her. I wasn't there because you told me she didn't want me, he growled. She begged. And you lied. Susan's expression twisted. I did what I had to. She was ruining everything. James stepped back, disgusted. She was dying. And you made sure she did it alone. You weren't strong enough to make the hard choices, Susan said coldly. So I did. There it was. No denial. No shame. Only justification. That night, James sat in the garage long after the sun had set, his old tools around him, the air filled with the scent of oil and rust. In his hands, he held a dusty wooden box, something he hadn't touched in years. Inside were letters, dozens of them. Lily's. She had written them during her final months. He thought they were gone. Susan told him she threw them out because they were too painful to keep. But one of the housekeepers had hidden them away. Quietly. Safely. Maybe she'd known the truth, too. James opened the first envelope. My darling James, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't say everything out loud. I tried, but there was never enough time. Or maybe someone always made sure you weren't there when I wanted to. Please know that I never gave up on you. Or Emily. Tears welled in James's eyes. He read until his eyes blurred, until his fingers ached from gripping paper, until the rage inside him began to shape itself into purpose. The next morning, Susan woke to find James standing at the foot of the bed, fully dressed, suitcase by his side. She blinked at him. What? What are you doing? I'm leaving, he said. Where? For how long? She sat up. Don't be ridiculous. You're angry. You're not thinking clearly. I've never been more clear, he said, his voice steady. I let you erase Lily. I let you silence Emily. I was a coward. No more. Susan scoffed. You think anyone will believe you? That I did anything wrong? I took care of you. This house. That girl. Don't say her name. His tone cut like a blade. Susan rose from the bed. You're throwing everything away for the memory of a woman who's gone. James met her eyes. She's not gone. She's right here. And every word I speak, now every step I take is for her. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out the door. 3 days passed. James and Emily stayed in a motel by the coast. They walked the shoreline, shared long silences, and slowly began the work of rebuilding a bond fractured by years of omission and pain. I want to go back to her grave, Emily said one evening as they watched the tide roll in. James nodded. We'll go together. The cemetery was quiet when they arrived, the sky a soft gray blue, the breeze cool. Lily's grave was nestled beneath a willow tree. Emily knelt beside the headstone and placed the old photo against the stone. I'm sorry, Mom, she whispered. I should have said something sooner. James stood behind her, hand on her shoulder. I should have listened, he said, and I should have known. But I promise you this. I will never let her silence you again. They stayed for a long time. When they left nothing unsaid. Susan didn't leave the house, but she found herself more and more alone. Neighbors stopped visiting. Friends stopped calling. Emily's guidance counselor, who had long suspected something was off, filed a report after Emily didn't return to school. Quiet investigations began. And James? He filed for divorce. He told the truth. All of it. People believed him. Because the truth, once it finds light, has a way of spreading. 2 months later, James and Emily moved into a small rental cottage by the sea. It wasn't fancy, but it was theirs. Emily started writing journals, essays, even a few poems about her mother. Her grief, once knotted and buried, slowly began to unfurl. James returned to painting, a hobby Lily had encouraged. He painted the lake, the garden, and one evening, a portrait of Lily from the photo Emily kept. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. One night, as father and daughter sat on the porch watching the stars rise, Emily turned to him. "Do you think she forgives us?" she asked. James looked up, eyes shining. "I think she never stopped loving us," he said, "even in the end." Emily leaned her head against his shoulder, and for the first time in years, the silence between them felt whole. The first cold of autumn crept in slowly, curling around the edges of windows and under doors like a ghost returning to places it once haunted. In their small cottage by the sea, James and Emily had found a fragile piece, but peace, like memory, was rarely permanent. James sat at the kitchen table, poring over the last of Lily's letters. They were fading now, both the paper and the words, ink softening like her voice in his mind. He read them slowly, aloud sometimes, letting Emily listen, letting Lily's voice settle between them. "You always made me feel safe," one letter said, "even when the world didn't make sense. If I'm not there when you read this, promise me you'll protect our daughter. She'll need you." He hadn't, but he was doing everything now to change that. Emily had started therapy, a warm woman named Dr. Lynn, who let her talk at her own pace, never pressed, never judged. Sometimes Emily would come home with red eyes and wet sleeves, but her steps were lighter. "Dad," she said one night, "I've been thinking. I want to write about it." James looked up. "About everything. What happened?" "Mom. Susan." The silence. He hesitated. "Are you sure?" "I think. If I don't, I'll always feel like she still wins." He understood, and he supported her. Meanwhile, in their old house, the house Lily once filled with sunlight, Susan sat alone. Her empire was crumbling. The divorce had finalized in record time. James hadn't fought for money or the house. He fought for the truth. The judge had granted a quiet but complete separation. Emily was no longer under Susan's care. James had provided sworn statements, and though Susan tried to paint Emily as emotionally unstable, her history, her words, and her school records all told a different story. The whispers began. In the grocery store, in church, among the neighbors she used to charm so easily. People stopped returning her waves. Her book club dissolved. Even her closest friends, those who once hung on her every word, grew distant. She tried to hold on to her pride, to her polished composure. But some nights, when the silence pressed too hard against the walls, Susan found herself staring at the hallway where Lily once lay dying. And she began to hear things. A voice in the stillness. A cough. A sob. The mind, she realized too late, is not always a faithful ally. In the cottage, Emily's writing bloomed into something raw and powerful. She started with journal entries, but soon they turned into essays. Essays into short stories. Her therapist encouraged her to submit to local contests, and she did hesitantly at first. But the response was overwhelming. One piece, titled "The Window I Couldn't Close," was published in a youth literary magazine. It spoke of grief not as a wave, but as a stain, something that seeped into corners and shadows until everything felt colored by it. She didn't name Susan directly, but anyone who read carefully could hear the truth. One afternoon, while Emily was out, a letter arrived. It was from Susan. James almost threw it away, but he didn't. He left it on the table for Emily. When she came home and saw it, her face went pale. She stood staring at it for a long time. "You don't have to read it," James said gently. But she did. She opened it with shaking hands. "Emily, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to read this. But I need to say something. I was cruel. I was afraid. Your mother reminded me of everything I hated in myself: weakness, sickness, emotion. She didn't deserve what I did. And neither did you. You were just a child. I tried to erase her, and in doing so, I erased you too. I see that now, and it haunts me. I don't ask you to come back. I don't ask you to understand. Just know, if I could undo it all, I would. Susan. Emily read it twice, then folded it. She didn't cry. She simply said, I think she's starting to rot from the inside. James didn't argue. By November, they decided to host a small memorial. Not a funeral. Lily had already been buried, but something that honored her life, not just her death. They invited only a handful of people: old friends, Lily's sister, a few neighbors who still remembered her smile. Emily spoke first. She stood in the soft ocean breeze with the photo still tucked in her hands. My mom taught me to love even when it hurt. She taught me that kindness isn't weakness. It's strength. And when she was sick, she still tried to laugh for me. She paused. She deserved better than silence. Better than the lie we let grow around her memory. But I'm not afraid of telling the truth anymore. She looked out at the gathered group. She's not gone. Not really. She's in everything I do now, and in everyone who refuses to let grief be the end of the story. People wept. James did too. When it was over, they scattered wildflower seeds around the grave. Something new would grow here. One evening, months later, James sat by the window, watching the waves. Emily sat beside him, typing away on her laptop. What are you writing now? He asked. She smiled. A story. About your mom? No, she said softly. About me. And you. And the lies we believed. And how we broke them. He looked at her with pride. The kind he wished he had shown sooner. You've become brave. Emily looked out the window. I had to. She closed her laptop. And besides, she said with a quiet smile, Mom always said the truth has teeth. We just have to be strong enough to face the bite. They sat in silence for a while. And this time, it was the kind of silence that healed. Winter came with a quiet fury, covering the coastal town in winds that rattled windows and made the ocean waves crash louder than ever. But inside the cottage, warmth pulsed from more than the small fireplace. Emily and James had found something rare: reconciliation, not just with each other, but with themselves. And yet, peace has a habit of drawing the past back to test its foundations. It started with a knock. One afternoon in late January, as Emily was baking lemon muffins and James was sorting through boxes of old photo albums, someone knocked gently at the door. Emily froze. James looked up. Stay there, he said quietly, walking to the door. When he opened it, a woman stood there, frail, aging, wearing a long wool coat with a scarf pulled tightly under her chin. She looked smaller than he remembered, less composed, less in control. Susan, I'm not here to stay, she said quickly. I just need 5 minutes. James didn't say anything. She glanced over his shoulder. Is she here? She's not speaking to you. I know. She looked down at her gloved hands, clasping and unclasping. I've sold the house, she said. I'm leaving town. James raised an eyebrow. Why tell me? Because, she said, swallowing, I didn't want to disappear like Lily did. Without closure. Without being seen. James was quiet for a long moment. You didn't let Lily have that dignity. Susan nodded, almost flinching. I know. That's why I'm asking now. Not for her, James said. For you. Susan didn't deny it. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. For Emily. I won't ask you to give it to her. But, if someday she asks about me, I hope you'll tell her I didn't run from the truth. Not in the end. She placed the envelope on the porch step. Then she turned and walked away, her steps slow, but certain. James stood watching until she disappeared around the corner. He didn't give Emily the envelope right away. Instead, he tucked it into a drawer in the kitchen, unsure whether keeping it was wise or weak. That night, over dinner, Emily told him she'd received a reply from a publisher. They want to run one of my stories in their next issue, she said, trying to sound casual. but her eyes sparkled. The one about the first time I realized Mom was sick. They said it was powerful. James reached over and squeezed her hand. It is powerful because it's real. She hesitated. They asked if I'd ever consider turning it into a memoir. James blinked. A memoir? She nodded. I've been thinking about it. Really thinking. Not just writing for therapy, but for others. For kids who might be scared, like I was. He smiled. Then you should do it. She chewed her lip, uncertain. What if people think I'm making it up? That I'm exaggerating? They won't, James said gently. And even if someone does, it doesn't make the truth less true. She looked at him with gratitude. I just want to make sure Mom's voice isn't forgotten. It won't be, he said, because it's still in your voice. Days passed. The letter from Susan remained unread, quietly tucked away. But it weighed on James's conscience. One morning, while Emily was out on a walk, he took it out again and laid it on the table. When she returned, wind-blown and red-cheeked, she saw it immediately. You kept it, she said flatly. I wasn't sure if you'd want it. I don't. He nodded. She poured herself some tea, standing quietly by the window. I dream about her sometimes, she said after a long pause. Your mother? She nodded. Sometimes I see her standing in my old room, just watching me. Sometimes she's crying. James looked down. I see her too. Emily turned toward the letter. Do you want to know what it says? He asked. No, she said, then paused. Maybe. Not today. So he left it there. A quiet truce with the past. By spring, Emily had finished the first 3 chapters of her memoir. She titled it The House That Forgot Her. It was about grief, yes, but more than that, it was about silence. The kind that spreads when no one speaks. The kind that makes people like Susan believe they can reshape truth with enough charm and control. James read every chapter. Slowly, sometimes twice. Each page was like unwrapping a wound they both shared. But with each sentence, healing stitched its way in. In one chapter, Emily wrote, My father wasn't a villain. He was just asleep. And the moment he woke up, he became my hero. James cried when he read that. Not out of pride, but out of sorrow for how long he'd been asleep. In April, a call came. Susan had suffered a stroke. She was alive, but partially paralyzed. She'd been moved to a care facility upstate. James didn't tell Emily right away. When he did, she listened silently, then asked only one question. Is she alone? Yes, he said. Emily looked away. I don't feel sorry for her, she said, and then her voice cracked. But I don't feel good either. James nodded. That's called being human. 3 weeks later, Emily did something that surprised even her. She asked to visit Susan. James drove them, silent for most of the trip. When they arrived at the facility, Emily stood outside for nearly 10 minutes, breathing deep, grounding herself. When she finally walked into the room, Susan looked at her with wide, shocked eyes. Emily stood in the doorway. I'm not here to forgive you. Susan's face twitched, the muscles on one side still slack from the stroke. I'm here, Emily continued, because I'm not afraid of you anymore. Susan blinked, and tears leaked from the corners of her eyes. I spent years thinking I was broken, Emily said. That something was wrong with me. But you were the one who was afraid. You punished everyone around you for feelings you couldn't face. She stepped closer. I'm not going to carry your shame anymore. It's yours. Keep it. Then, quietly, she placed a single daffodil on the bedside table. My mom loved these, she whispered. Not that you ever noticed. And then she walked away. On the drive home, Emily didn't say much. James didn't push her to. Later that night, as they watched the ocean glimmer under a full moon, she said, I didn't feel closure. I didn't feel peace. James waited. But I felt free. He smiled. That's enough, he said. She leaned her head on his shoulder. I think I'm ready to send my book proposal, she said. James wrapped his arm around her. Then let's send it tomorrow. By summer, Emily had a literary agent. By autumn, a publishing deal. The book would be released the following spring, and already, Early readers were calling it haunting, powerful, and necessary. And in the acknowledgments, she wrote, "To the girl I used to bear silence was never your fault. To my father, thank you for waking up. To my mother, your voice is in every page." When James read the final manuscript, he closed the cover slowly, placed it on the table, and looked out the window. The wind danced through the garden Emily had planted: daisies, tulips, wildflowers, all things Lily once loved. And James whispered, not to himself, but to the sky beyond the glass, "She did it, Lily. Our little girl did it." The end.